Coogs House, the Houston Cougars have found their point guard of the future, or so we hope.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. If you want to join the conversation, don't know what to say, tell us down below. In spirit of my guest today, do you put Cheese Whiz on your sandwich? Because today I've got Maxwell Baumbach of the No Ceilings podcast and newsletter and all kinds of things NBA draft coverage on. And Maxwell, do you put cheese? I know you're a Philly guy, right? Do you put Cheese Whiz on your sandwich?
I do. I like the cheesesteak with Cheese Whiz. So I'm in the Chicagoland area, and my wife grew up in like the central part of the state. Had never had anything resembling an authentic Philly cheesesteak before. And there's a place that opened like randomly in one of the suburbs around here that gets like the official Amorosa roll, like authentic Philly cheesesteaks. And she got so mad at me because I was like, you've got to try it with the Cheese Whiz first. And she like tried a Philly cheesesteak with Cheese Whiz, and she's like, this is terrible. Like, I never want this again. I would have been so much happier if I just got it with provolone. I was like, I'm sorry, I ruined your lunch by peer pressuring you. So I'm a Cheese Whiz guy personally. I like the Cheese Whiz.
It's an acquired taste. I've never put it on a sandwich before, so I'll trust you. Maybe pay enough at Philly one day. I'll have to give it a try when it's in the right spot. Today, though, we're here to talk about. I was gonna say a Las Vegas native, but it feels like Milos Uzan has been around everywhere. He went to high school in a couple different places. He's been to Oklahoma the last 2 years, and we're here talking because he recently committed to Houston in the transfer portal. Spent 2 years at Oklahoma, did a bunch of different good things there, started nearly every game in his 2 years there, all Big 12 freshman team, You got to talk to him. You looked at his game from a pro scout perspective. Maxwell, if you're going to tell people like one thing to define what Milos does, what would it be?
Yeah, so in my article about him, and this was prior to last season, the article was titled, Milos Uzan is the ultimate orchestrator. And that's what he is. He's an orchestrator. He is a run-the-show point guard. He plays with a lot of finesse. He's very creative. He's very slick. He is a guy that, like you picture a point guard in your head, and that's going to be a lot of what Milos Uzan does. He brings the ball up the floor, operates out of a lot of ball screens, and is very creative in doing so. Sometimes he's going to split the screen. Sometimes he's going to come off it traditionally, and you don't know who he's going to pass it to. He sees the entire floor. He can live dribble pass with either hand. He'll reject ball screens. Whatever he can do to find a very small advantage, he will do. His dad was a coach, like you mentioned him jumping around high schools a little bit. It was actually kind of an interesting story. So he played at Desert Pines in Vegas. His dad was the coach there. Kind of like outgrew the school in a sense. Like he was shooting up recruiting boards. So then he went to play at Prolific in California, and COVID happened. So then it was like, all right, well now I can't, like they didn't have a season. So then he went to Compass AZ Prep. So it wasn't a case of like a school hopper, like I don't like what I'm getting kind of thing. It was a little bit more circumstantial in his case. So I don't think he's a guy that's necessarily going to like run away from a challenge or anything like that. Because I think sometimes people see like 4 high schools and they can get that idea. But yeah, I think the son of a coach thing is like a really key part of who he is as a player and who he is as a person. Like he is a film junkie.
Well, and I wonder if that'll be his connection with Sampson. I've already seen quotes from his dad saying, once they got the call to come visit Houston, they stopped taking other calls. Like they knew if they got that offer, that was the big one. I thought it was interesting coming from it. Like you said, his dad's a high school coach. And you say he sets people up. Obviously, as a guy that looks at the guys transitioning to the pros, you've seen the kind of scorers and shooters and like LJ Cryer, Emmanuel Sharp around Houston. Do you think that is going to pair well together? Like just from afar, like I see a guy that passed the ball and think, okay, he's got shooters. This could be fun. But also, I remember like we needed every one of Jamal Shead's 29 against Texas Tech, right? So like,
yeah, that's like where it gets scary. It's like him and Jamal Shead are both like very smart point guards who go about setting up their teammates in completely different ways. With Shead, it's a little bit more predicated on like speed, some physical advantages that he has, and a little bit more like grit. Like it's a little more like, I'm going to get into the heart of the defense and then find you. Uzan is a little bit more of like, I use the word finesse earlier. He's very much a finesse player. And he's not the scorer that Jamal Shead is, which is where we can kind of get into some of the concerns, I guess, about Uzan. So the playmaking is like huge. The playmaking is this thing, 4.4 assists to 2 turnovers last year. Undeniably like a phenomenal, just like run the show setup man. He did not score the ball very well last year. Shot under 40% from the field, 29.6% from 3, 67.6% at the free throw line, which is pretty discouraging too. So as a freshman, he shot 40.8% from 3. But he only took 2.2 per game. And like, as someone who looks at college basketball often through the lens of the NBA draft, low volume is like a much bigger red flag than like a low percentage a lot of the times. Where I was bullish on Uzan as a shooter was that he'd actually increased his volume throughout the course of his freshman season. And then this year, the shot just didn't fall. I would say the hope is that it might have been like a bad shooting variance season. So he actually made 35% of his pull-up threes and then was like 25% off the catch, which like the year before, he was like 44% off the catch. So we're dealing with really small samples because this is a guy that doesn't take a lot of threes. So it's still hard to know like what's what. Like, is he the 25? Is he the 44? Like, what is he? Is an off the catch 3-point shooter. He's going to need to be more effective as a scorer, like period, point blank, just because a lot of these like I call them like very pass first guards. It can be tough. Like it's hard for a defense to like respect you. And if they're not respecting you, it's hard to set guys up. I think the other key difference between him and a guy like Jamal Shead is that Uzan is like, I keep using the word finesse. He's not a very physical player. He rarely gets to the free throw line. He took 1.2 free throw attempts per game. He's not a guy who is going to seek contact or work super hard to get deep into the paint. If you're an NBA fan, think more like Tyrese Halliburton than De'Aaron Fox. It's a lot more like, I'm going to come off and I'm going to see everything versus I'm going to go in and then see out. He's a little bit more of a perimeter-oriented passer.
I think there are worlds in which this works. I don't mean to come across.
I know, I
folks
do.
Listening,
I think so too.
Right? Like I don't. They're very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the key differences is, frankly, Jamal Shead's about 6 foot and very strong, and Uzan is about 6'4" and change and listed at $190. And I think, if I'm being frank, that's a little generous. All right, now I want to talk about building Uzan into the Houston Cougar basketball roster and fitting that in. But when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are the right role, much like Uzan. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools you need to find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively looking for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. LinkedIn knows that people in those businesses are wearing too many hats and might not have the time or resource to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make that process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/locked-on-college. That's linkedin.com/locked-on-college today.
I think he is that size. I do think he's like 6'4".
Well,
I don't know about the weight.
I was speaking to the weight. I think he's tall.
Yeah.
He's tall. He's long, but that's a distinct difference. How does that play onto the defense side of the floor? Because that's really Houston's calling card in this run they've had for several years has been the defense side of the ball.
So he's not going to be Jamal Shead. Like
no one in college basketball.
I just want to be clear. I do think he's better than people realize on defense. And I think that was true even after his freshman season. He's really long and like he actually plays more physical on defense than he does on offense. Like he will play pretty tight at times. And like, he's really hard to shake. Like he's very disciplined and like that IQ and like intelligence shows up on defense as well. Like you're not really going to outsmart him. Like, and he's able to get skinny in convenient ways. So like, if you're trying to like mess with him around a ball screen, like he's just going to keep slipping around that thing and like make you find a way to beat him. Like he's going to give multiple efforts on the ball. He's one of those, like I call like get in low strip block guys, where like if he does have to help around the basket, he's going to get in low on the ball instead of like trying to meet you up top and getting called for a foul because he's skinny. And he's a really active communicator. Like if you just like watch him on the defensive end, he's always talking, he's pointing things out. So I actually think that's going to be kind of like an interesting thing for him and his development. Is I like him being in a system like this where there is going to be like that defensive identity, and it's going to give him just another thing to kind of hang his hat on as he develops. But I think he's going to come in like he's never been like an all defense guy or anything like that. But I think he's going to come in like ready to play defense and contribute. And I think he's going to get better as the year goes along because he is that like film junkie kind of kid. I think he's going to really embrace it, and he's going to get better and better on that side of the floor.
Well, and that's all the coach's kid aspect you talked about. I mean, when he's communicating on the side of the floor, I think that all kind of fits in the same story here, right? It's all that all makes a lot of sense. As a person who has followed this guy fairly closely, again, I mentioned you talked to him, you covered him, you've looked at his pro prospects down the line, et cetera. I mean, you seem to know him very, very well as far as what his outlook will be. When you saw him commit to Houston, as a person who just likes basketball, doesn't necessarily a Houston fan of it, what did you think?
I was a little taken aback just because, like, identity-wise, it feels a little like different. And I'm known for like my deep cuts and like being kind of a sicko, knowing all these names. Like, if you would have told me like Tyler Perkins from Yale committed to Houston, where he's like 6'4" and he's built like a bowling ball and just plays this like ultra aggressive, ultra physical style, I would have been like, oh, totally, I get it. Uzan was just like kind of a departure from what I expected. And that's not to say like I think it won't work. It was just surprising. I think there's some real upside with it though, because like you mentioned LJ Cryer, you've got Emmanuel Sharp, like you've got these like real deal shooters that he can set up. And I think he's also going to benefit from having these sort of like physical bigs that Houston always has, like your Juwan Roberts, your Javier Francis, JoJo Tugler is the guy I'm really interested in long term as well. Like at Oklahoma, the bigs that they play through are a little bit like kind of ground bound, but they're not as like space clearing. They're not going to set like as good of screens. Like Hughley was a little bit more of like a floor spacer, like occasionally shoots a three, but not super bouncy. Like Goodwin was like a solid rollman, but like they're not Houston's bigs. And I think that's going to be the interesting thing is like getting to play with a Juwan Roberts, who's just going to set you the nastiest screen you've ever seen in your life. And like Javier Francis is going to be the same thing. Tugler's going to be the same thing. Like having these just like big, powerful big men that like to do the dirty work. Like, I think that's really interesting. And I wonder if that like helps him out. Does that make him get downhill more? If he's coming off like these really good screens, if he has like these kind of guys that he can dump it to down low, does that like further open up his passing lane? Because he's never had like a rim gravity roll man either. Like, I think there's some really interesting things about this fit that the more I think through it, the more kind of excited I get to see how it's going to play out. Because I think it may actually be a better situation for him than Oklahoma was, if nothing else.
Well, and frankly, I mean, Houston won a thriller there in Norman. And I want to remind folks that it didn't win the game for Oklahoma, obviously, but like the game-saving play for Oklahoma was made by Uzan on a ball going out of bounds. He saved off of Sharp to give them another chance, right? And then they tied it up, and then they came down and Shead won the game, right? But like, if it's not for his hustle and effort, like frankly, a very Houston Cougar type of play, I'd argue, the game was over then, right? And I'm trying to figure out what to make of this guy still in the fit now that it's officially happening. I will say, though, that I look at the frame, I look at the IQ, I look at the passing, get really, really excited. Yeah. Right. Is this a guy that can get like 7 assists a game next year? Are we looking at because that would be a pretty big bump from what he got to do at Oklahoma?
I think so. I think I would be much more willing to believe that he has like a gigantic assist season than a giant scoring season. I think he can absolutely put up those kind of numbers and be the guy that just like runs the show and gets everybody else set up. Because like LJ Cryer is like a great player. He's not like the most like, he's not like a self-starter offensively. Like he's not going to go create his own shot a lot of times. Like he's better being set up. Same with Sharp. Like as much as like Juwan Roberts has like that kind of like nifty, shifty face-up game, like I think he's going to benefit from having like this type of setup man as well. I would not be surprised at all if he ends up having a monster assist year. Because the other thing to consider too is that like Javion McCollum, who we played alongside, is also like a 6'1" guard who had the ball in his hands a lot. So if he is like the one setup man, I don't see any reason he couldn't be like toward the top of the Big 12 in assists when push comes to shove. Or the SEC. The SEC, I'm sorry, the SEC.
No, top of the league is what we like to hear. That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Maxwell, you mentioned you're a draft sicko. You mentioned Yale. I will say Ivy League could play ball last year. There are a lot of good Ivy League ball players out there last year. Where can people find you, that sicko stuff, the deep dive cuts in the draft, or if they want to read about Jamal, wherever they're reading about their draft coverage?
For sure. Well, first off, I want to apologize because Tyler Perkins was actually not a Yale player. He was actually a Penn player, and I screwed that up, and I said Yale. He was a Penn guy. There was a lot of Ivy League guards that I was interested in this year, and I got the score wrong on him. But you can find me on Twitter/X at Baumboards, BAUM, and then the word boards. At No Ceilings NBA is where all of our daily NBA draft content is. And then, NoCeilingsNBA.com, you can get my written work. I've got a huge preview of the Portsmouth Invitational coming out this week, so stay tuned for that.
Thanks for coming on again, Maxwell. It's a fun time as always. I'm hoping this works out like we think. A lot of assists and a lot of other guys scoring would be a really good, nice thing. The main thing is let's just stay healthy, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah.